were mute witness to the classic experiment in Satyagraha that was carried out here in 1928 under the leadership of Vallabhbhai Patel. The British government had increased the tax on land. When all appeals to bring it down fell on deaf ears, the men and women of Bardoli launched a movement of complete non-cooperation. No barber would shave government servants, no carriage would carry them, and drums would be played when a government official entered the village, warning the villagers, and the streets would immediately become deserted. When the people refused to pay the land tax, their land was forfeited and cattle seized. The people of Bardoli remained firm and drew inspiration from Vallabhbhai, whom they fondly referred to as their Sardar. The British grew desperate to end the movement, afraid that it might spread to the rest of the country. The Battle of Bardoli was won, and the slogan of Bardolizing India resounded through the country. India's Sardar was born.
So Bardoli gave Sardar to India. Gandhiji heard that people are calling him Sardar. So he was the Sardar of all India. So Bardoli gave Sardar to India. Then that he was Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel.
Uttam Chand Shah is a man who hasn't forgotten. He is one of the last few we have amongst us who haven't forgotten. Perhaps as he sits relaxing on the hitchcock outside his room in the ashram, the memories of the past are far more vivid to him than his experiences of the present. With the success of Bardoli, Vallabhbhai, the hero of the hour, was the natural choice for the presidentship at the annual Congress session at Lahore in 1929. Yet, Gandhi preferred Jawaharlal, and bowing to Gandhi's wishes, Patel withdrew. The Lahore session was historic because for the first time, Congress made complete independence its main goal and unfurled the tricolour on the banks of the river Ravi. Characteristically, there is no record of what Patel felt about the sacrifice. Events like these and later differences led to the simplistic view of Patel and Nehru as opponents. But a closer look at their actual contribution to the national movement reveals otherwise.
Intellectuals have tended to neglect Sardar Patel because, I think mainly because of the towering figures of his two contemporaries, Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru. But in fact, great men as these two were, they too suffered from certain lacuna, not weaknesses, but certain lacuna. No one person can be everything, no person can be God. Sardar Patel's great contribution to freedom struggle is that he made up the lacuna from which Gandhiji and Jawaharlal Nehru suffered. No struggle can function without proper organization. He provided, in the crucial years of the 30s and 40s, the organization structure for the freedom struggle, especially in the periods when no mass struggle was going on and where the movement had to be kept alive through organizational measures, through day-to-day agitation. A very boring job, but a very necessary job.
Often, while recounting the story of the national movement, what takes center stage are the more dramatic and tangible events like campaigns, agitations, marches. What tend to be neglected are the backstage efforts that make these events possible and successful. This is precisely the job that the Sardar undertook so effectively. And the stage was now set for one more nationwide campaign, and this time a decisive one, the historic Quit India movement. Preempting the movement, the British arrested all the major national leaders in a single sweep, and the Sardar found himself along with Nehru, Azad, Kriplani and others in the Ahmednagar jail. In the nearly 30 months that he spent here, he had to confront an uncertain future, indifferent health and the fact that at 68 he had very little time left. In September 1943, Vallabhbhai wrote a letter from the Ahmednagar jail to his daughter Maniben, who was then in Yerwara jail. Don't be thinking about when you will meet me or whether you will see me again at all. When a leaf ripens, it falls. I will go the same way. You are not to be dejected even a little by my going. Not that it is about to happen. Vallabhbhai and Maniben had an extraordinary relationship, rare between a father and a daughter. She lived with the Sardar, looked after him, travelled with him, regulated his appointments, and maintained a detailed diary of his movements and meetings. From 1927 onwards, she even spun all the yarn that covered his body. Yet, here too, like in every other aspect of his life, Sardar was silent and undemonstrative.
Maniben and Sardar Patel had deep attachment and a deep emotional relationship, but they were not demonstrative about it. Both of them were, on the surface, very dry people, though very rich emotionally inside. I believe that without Maniben, Sardar Patel would not have been able to achieve a great deal of what he did achieve. She was his permanent support, and she was a great woman because she sacrificed all that she had, including her personality, to be able to take care of Sardar Patel, to be able to give him moral support, spiritual support, emotional support, and above all, physical support. I think this country has not given as much recognition to Maniben as she deserves.
My father didn't speak to me of anything. In the morning, he would ask me how I was. That's all.
Maniben, even though she was a very well-educated lady and vocal in her own way, purposely and deliberately decided to merge her entire life into Sardar's. She avoided her marriage in order to look after Sardar and become his shadow. In the later life, Sardar required constant nursing. So Maniben became his nurse. She became her silent but continuous shadow. She was the only link between Sardar and his family. And yet the great tragedy is that even though the father and daughter were continuously staying together, they hardly ever had any conversation. But Sardar was the sole and only focus and purpose of life as far as Maniben was concerned. So after his death, she became a lost soul.
Long years ago, we made a tryst with destiny, and now the time comes.
Freedom came at midnight on the 15th of August 1947.
Or in full measure, but very substantially. At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom.
Sardar Patel, who had contributed so much to the struggle for independence, did not speak on the occasion. Power had changed hands. Those who had so far resisted and opposed the rulers were now the new rulers of India. Once again, when it was time to choose a leader for the new India, it was not the organizer, the silent man of action, but the charismatic and popular visionary who donned the mantle of prime ministership. The Sardar became independent India's Home Minister and Deputy Prime Minister. Was the Sardar disappointed? Did he feel bitter? We are never to know. But here was a man who had always, very clearly and ruthlessly treated his personal and innermost feelings as entirely irrelevant to the larger good of the nation.
In habits, in appearance, in approach to life, Sardar resembles very closely the Spartans of ancient history.
known for their bravery, for their endurance, and for their profound silence. Sardar too was a man of action. He would not waste his time and energy in useless discussions. He never expressed his emotions, his feelings, his sufferings, even his frustrations. And he never boasted about his achievements. He never wrote his biography, he never maintained a diary, and his presidential speech to the Congress is the shortest speech in its history.
वैसे तो मेरे प्यारे भाई राजेंद्र बाबू ने कहा आप लोगों को कि मैं कम बोलने वाला आदमी हूं। क्यों मैं कम बोलता हूं? एक सूत्र है कि जो मैंने सीख लिया है कि मौनम मूर्खस्य भूषण, जाके बोलना अच्छा नहीं, वो विद्वानों का काम है। लेकिन जो हम बोले उसी के ऊपर हम न चल सके तो हमारा बोलना नुकसान का ही है।
A view of old Delhi from the minarets of the Jama Masjid. Hardly had the euphoria of freedom abated when came the horrors of the partition. The demographic character of Delhi altered forever in the post-partition rioting, as a large segment of the capital's Muslim population had to leave the country and vast numbers of Hindu and Sikh refugees came in. It is estimated that approximately 5.5 million refugees from either country crossed over to the other side, and around 200,000 were killed. These were trying times for the nation, and especially for the Home Minister, who was responsible for handling the situation. Sardar managed this in the most effective and pragmatic way that he could.
In fact, I remember that when B.M. Birla suggested to the Sardar after partition that now that a separate Muslim state has been created, could we not declare India as a Hindu state and Hindu religion as the official religion of India? The Sardar rejected the suggestion out of hand. He said India belongs to all, including the Hindus, the Muslims, the Sikhs, the Christians, the Parsis and the Buddhists.
To the Sardar, the sovereignty of the country was of utmost importance. Whatever needed to be done to preserve it just had to be done. This explains the manner in which he executed the integration of the princely states. He did the job surely, swiftly and ruthlessly, using appeasement, persuasion and, if required, even force. He was at that time a man already 72 years old. Kashmir, the one state which he wasn't allowed to tackle, is a wound that continues to fester even today. A winter morning at Lodi Gardens, where Sardar would often come for a morning walk from his official residence at 1 Aurangzeb Road. Here, all kinds of thoughts must have raced through his mind as he paced up and down. Also, in the quietness of this environment, he might have reflected on his increasing loneliness. Old friends with whom he had shared a past were either dead or dying. Mahadev Desai, his intimate friends the Kanugas of Ahmedabad, were dead. But the greatest source of pain to him were the growing differences that had arisen between him and the most important and beloved man in his life, Gandhi. Differences that had so far been kept under rein, so much so that he had earlier been described as a blind follower of Gandhi. But now, like Nehru, he differed with Gandhi on an issue of utmost importance to the country. the acceptance of partition and the matter of payment of 55 crore rupees to Pakistan. Though these issues were resolved politically, they left a sense of hurt in the relationship. Gandhi and Sardar were to meet for a heart-to-heart talk at 4 p.m. at Birla House on the 30th of January 1948. What transpired on this fateful day has gone down in the annals of history. The events of that day were described in utter anguish by the man of few words in a broadcast on All India Radio.
मेरा दिल दर्द से भरा हुआ है, क्या कहूँ क्या न कहूँ, जबान चलती नहीं है। आज का अवसर भारतवर्ष के लिए बड़ा दुख, शोक और शर्म का है। आज 4 बजे मैं उनके पास गया था और 1 घंटे तक मैंने बात की। वो घड़ी निकाल के मुझको कहने लगे कि मेरा प्रार्थना का समय हो गया है, अब मुझको जाने दीजिए। तो भगवान के मंदिर के तरफ अपने हमेश के समय पर चलने निकल पड़े। तब मैं वहां से मेरे मकान पर जा रहा था। मैं मकान पर पहुंचा नहीं, उतने में रास्ते में मेरे पास एक भाई आया। उसने कहा कि एक नौजवान हिंदू ने गांधी जी को प्रार्थना की जगह पर जाते अपनी पिस्तौल चला के 3 गोली चलाई।
Personal sorrow notwithstanding, work had to go on. The country had to be run, decisions made, precedents established, and systems of governance set into place. As usual, the Sardar placed his duties above everything else. But his heart was broken. In November 1950, he fell ill. When Mani heard the words of the bhajan, Mangal Mandir Kholo, on his lips, she knew that the end was near.
एक कविता श्री नरसिंहराव दिवेटिया ने लिखी थी उनके पुत्र के देहांत के समय। एक कविता में उन्होंने भगवान से प्रार्थना की है कि हे ईश्वर, तू मेरे बच्चे के लिए अपना द्वार खोल दे। बहुत कम उम्र में वो तेरे पास आया है, तू उसको प्यार दे, तेरी गोद में बिठा। मंगल मंदिर खोलो दयामय, मंगल मंदिर खोलो, मंगल मंदिर।
The Sardar passed away on the 15th of December 1950, leaving behind him a legacy of selflessness, courage,